Hello and welcome to Veg Around the World with me, Meenakshi Garodia, where I believe in simple recipes, authentic taste. In this show, we travel to one country at a time through the cuisine. Today, the country is going to be Russia. Now, Russia is the largest country in the world, and what I'm giving you today is just going to be a flavor of the country because it's got way too many cuisines, way too much going on for us to cover it in one show. Russia, the climate is very cold, so a lot of the staple is foods that can be preserved easily. So a lot of root vegetables like beet, parsnips, potatoes, and actually mushrooms is really big in Russia too. Mushrooms, there's a whole Russian culture around mushrooms where families go foraging for mushrooms in the forests, and it's like a family activity, and a lot of people have almost emotional connections to mushroom. So we're going to do this really amazing dish with mushrooms and mashed potatoes. In spices, there aren't really too many spices in Russian food. It's a very basic, hearty sort of food. They use a lot of salt, pepper, and dill and parsley. Parsley is actually the leaf part of parsnips. So sometimes you can almost use them interchangeably. So like in my borscht today, I'm using parsley leaves instead of parsnips. I actually had the good fortune of visiting Russia a couple of years ago for a holiday, and being vegetarian was not that much fun there because even though most of the populace actually eats vegetarian food because meat is not easily available and it's very expensive, at least it was for a long time. But in restaurants, it's very meat heavy. So if you're purely vegetarian, where you don't want meat stocks and you don't want a little bit of meat in your food, then it was a bit of a challenge. We got a lot of potatoes, mushrooms, and borscht, which is essentially a lot of what I'm making. So the menu today is going to be, so one of my favorite Russian things to eat is piroshki, which is basically a dinner roll stuffed. Normally they stuff it with meat or cabbage or mushrooms. I'm going to do it with cabbage, but the way I'll show you today, you can do this with anything. You're going to have borscht. Borscht is basically a soup. It's a hot beet soup with a bunch of other vegetables in it, but beet is the basic flavor in it. Normally, borscht takes a long time to cook because beet actually takes a very long time to cook, but I have a little shortcut. Now, typically, I don't like using canned stuff, but sometimes, hey, if it cuts my cooking time down by 1 hour, I'll take it. And we're going to have the mushroom dish with the potatoes, which I've already mentioned. And we're going to have that with the dessert we're going to have is baked apple. Now, the way Russians do apple, it's very interesting, but I'll get into that a little bit later. And Russian food really sort of calls out for vodka. But in case you don't drink, I'm going to teach you a non-alcoholic compote or fruit tea that they like to have with their thing. So let's get started. I'm going to start off with the stuff that needs to be baked first. We're going to be baking two things. We're going to be baking the apples and the pirozhki. Now, for the pirozhki, what's easy, I'm going to call them cabbage buns, just so that I get the pronunciation right. But for the cabbage buns, what you need to do is you go to any grocery store and you buy dinner rolls. It's in the frozen aisle, and you let it thaw out overnight. And once it's thawed out overnight, you take it out and you keep the individual rolls. You just let them puff up. You can see it, and you can tell it's puffed up because when you press down, it gives. Now, if you were doing this at home, this requires a lot of work. It took me like 2 minutes. So we're going to keep this aside while we prepare the cabbage. But even before the cabbage, I'm going to start with the apples. Now, the way Russians do they have two types, everybody knows there are two types of apples, right? Green and red. Now, green is more abundant than red. So in Russia, typically you will eat the red apple, but you will cook with the green apple. So you core the apple. Now, the Russian way of coring it is very complicated. You take a very thin knife, something really small, you cut in like this, but you don't go all the way down. You leave the bottom part intact. I refuse to do that much work. It takes way too much time. So I just take a regular apple and I bought a corer. I know that's a little bit cheating, but it really makes a big difference. So coring is actually fun. You just take a corer and you go down into it. I'm actually going to make a very big hole. You probably can't see it, but you still have seeds in this. So I'm going to do one more jab. And trust me, this is so much easier than doing it with a knife. And these corals are really reasonable. It's like $3 for this one. Okay, and once the apple is nicely cored, we're going to cut it just down the center. You can actually just use it like it is and put the stuffing inside, but I prefer it baked because I can get more stuffing in, which is the yummy part. So we're going to slice this. And when you have apples, it's a good idea to put just a few drops of lemon in it. So we're just going to put a few drops of lemon. And again, don't be scared of using your hands. So for the mixture, what we're going to do is we're going to take some walnuts. Walnuts, I just buy them in the halves and then I just crunch them. This is fun and it gives your hand a little exercise. It's good to give your hands exercise which is not related to computers or texting. You take regular raisins. I'm going to put 2 packs because I want to make a lot of mixture. This mixture is delicious. Apples are actually quite sour, these green apples. So you want to make sure that they have enough sweet in them to be a nice dessert. Now, you don't really need butter in this, but I really like it with butter. So I'm going to, this butter has been out for a bit. I'm just going to put around 1/3 of the stick and I'm going to mix it in. It's a bit hard, so I'm just slicing it so that it's easier to mix in. I'm going to take a good amount of sugar, so let me give you in teaspoons. I'm going to take around 1, 2, 3 tablespoons. This stuffing is actually going to be enough for maybe 4 apples. I'm just making a lot because I'm going to make some more later. And some cinnamon powder, so just regular cinnamon powder, 1 teaspoon. What you do is you take a spoon or whatever you have and you mix it. And you have to work you can actually melt the butter a bit, but I'm just working it in. So once your mixture is ready, this is delicious. I used my hands. I went for it. You take your apple, you put some in the boat, you fill it in, then you take another amount and you put it on top and you just smoosh it down. What I also do is I give my apple a little bit of a flat surface so that it can rest nicely, and I use my hands to rub on it because this will put some butter on it. And this is another reason why I cut the apples instead of just coring it, because if I cored it I would have had this much in the whole thing, but now I have a good amount. Now you preheat the oven to 350. Mine's already started. I'm going to put this in. And there, we're done. We're going to bake this for around 25 minutes to half an hour. You sort of need to see it. You need to see the skin melting. It's possible this will fall apart, but there's no problem in that. And let's put this aside. I'm just going to clean up and be right back. And I'm back. So the next thing we're going to do is the other baked dish, which is the piroshki, cabbage rolls. For the cabbage rolls, it's actually pretty simple. You just take a little bit of water, not too much. Now for the cabbage rolls, you can actually cut the cabbage, and that's what I did right now. But personally, I just go into the store and you get these shredded cabbage packs and I just use that. So I'm going to use this, but I'm going to just leave a little bit for the borscht. You put the cabbage in it. I think this is enough. I'm not making too many rolls today, so I'm not going to use all of it. You add a little bit of salt, just to taste. Now traditionally they don't use pepper in it, but I find the traditional cabbage rolls a little bit bland. So I'm just going to use some pepper. And again, it's your decision. As I said, cooking is not an exact science. You need to play around, figure out what it is that you like. And next time you try it, you make it differently. And I've tried this a few times. And I'm going to give it a little. Now the oil that they use in Russia is normally sunflower oil. That's very abundant. But what I'm going to use is just some regular oil, olive oil. I just use either olive or canola typically. So if possible, I prefer using olive. And we're just going to let this cook. While this is cooking, let's get started with our borscht. Now, as I mentioned, borscht is basically a very root vegetable soup. You normally, the way it was had earlier versus what's made now is slightly different, and I like the modern version better because, like for example, typically tomatoes are not easily available in Russia. They weren't, at least. So earlier the borscht did not have any, but now we do have it. So what I'm going to be putting in mine is onions, beets, carrots, cabbage, a little bit of garlic, you can put parsnips, but I'm just going to put parsley, and a little bit of dill and sour cream to top it off. So let's get started. You turn on the heat and you put a little bit of oil. Now all your vegetables in a borscht should be similar size. So I have the cabbage here, I have onions sliced here, the other onions are for my other dish. I have some carrots which are, again, I just buy them from the store shredded. If you have a food processor or if you're really enthusiastic, you can sit and grate it or chop it. I'm not. I'm going to put that in. We're going to let it start and I'll be right back. And I'm back. So while my onions are heating and the cabbage is cooking, I'm just going to prep the other things for my borscht. So one of the things I'm going to use is I'm going to use this on my cutting board because you need to be a little bit careful with beet. Beet is yummy and it's delicious, but you don't want to get it on your clothes. It does not come off. So as I said, I just use these small whole beets and I chop them up into the similar size. What I'm going to do is, typically I never use the sauce that it comes in, but because you want the borscht to be a really deep beet red versus a tomato red, we are going to actually preserve it and use it in our stock. And I don't want my cutting board to get ruined, so I'm just going to use this. You don't really need to make it fine, but I'm going to. So I'm going to chop this and be right back. And I'm back. Let me just quickly look at all my various things. The onion looks good. So the next thing you add, you should add your vegetables in terms of the things which are toughest to cook. So I'm just going to put a handful of carrots. I'm going to put some tomato paste, maybe like 2 spoons. Half a can basically. I'm going to put the beets in. I'm going to put some cabbage. See, advantages of using foil. I don't have to get my hands more messy. And give it a good stir. So we're going to add some broth to this, but I'm going to let it cook for a while like this, so that these vegetables really get cooked. I'm going to cover it. I'm going to put some salt first, a little bit of salt, not too much because the stock, the vegetable stock and all that has some salt, so just a little bit of salt. I don't know whether you know that, but salt also helps you cook your vegetables a lot faster. There are some vegetables that you shouldn't, some vegetarian dishes you should not add salt to. Normally cabbage is one of them. Anything green, or mushrooms, if you put salt up front, it just sort of like wilts. All the water comes out of the dish. So, but in this we don't mind it because we're making a soup. We do want the water to come out. So I'm going to give it a good stir and shut it. I'm also going to, now this cabbage it will cook a lot faster if we cook it covered, but the texture of the cabbage will change. We want this cabbage to be a little bit crunchy. So we're going to keep letting it cook on a high flame with a little bit of water. Now while these things are underway, let's start off with our mushrooms and our compote soup, tea, I'm sorry. For the tea, what we're going to do is we're going to take some water. In this water, we're going to add some cranberry juice. Cranberry is very popular in Russia. And we are hopefully going to be much stronger and open it really fast. And we're going to add some fruits to it. So we're going to add some raspberries, blueberries, and some apples. I'm just going to peel and cut some apple, but I'm going to start this off in the meantime. I'm also going to put in a couple of sticks of cinnamon and a few drops of vanilla. It becomes extremely fragrant and delicious. After I cook it for a bit, I'm going to test it for sugar because you don't want it to be very sour. Cranberry can be very tart and sour. You want it to be something that you enjoy, the right level of sugar for you. There, the borscht looks good. What I'm going to add to this is a clove of garlic. Now the way you put the garlic in a borscht, you don't chop it up, you crush it. So I just take my knife and give it a good crush. And I'm going to add it in. And some parsley. As I said, I'm not going to use parsnips, I'm going to use parsley. So I'm just going to use a little bit, which I'm going to chop up. It's interesting, you have so many different cuisines and they all use some herbs in common. Parsley, for example, or cilantro. The other thing you need to do is you need to add some boiling broth to this. You can actually make the broth at home or you can buy store-made broth and heat it. So I buy store-made broth and I actually heat it in the microwave so that it's easy for me to heat. So I've just put in the beetroot juice. I'm going to let this simmer this while I heat my vegetable broth, and I'm going to heat this and be right back. And I'm back. So this is some heated broth which I'm just going to add, and believe it or not, our borscht is done. We just need to let it cook. Give it a good stir, and we need to let it cook enough so that all the vegetables get cooked through. Now you can actually have a borscht hot or cold. If it's hot, you just cook it, put a dollop of cream and some dill like I want to show you, and you serve it. But you can also keep it in the fridge for a hot summer's day. You keep it in the fridge, you take it out and you serve it chilled. It's a bit like the gazpacho, which is made with cucumbers. You could actually even chop cucumbers if you feel like it. Now, if you look at the texture of this, this is very liquidy. But this liquid gets evaporated, and because these are root vegetables, they're very dense. So when you eat them, they feel very thick. So you need a little extra liquid to compensate for that. So this is done, we're going to leave it. Let's check on our cabbage. The cabbage looks good. I'm just going to let it keep going because I want all the water to evaporate. The water has to almost totally evaporate. Okay, this is perfect. This is done. So we're going to get started on our last dish, which is essentially mushrooms and potatoes. Now, I don't know what there is not to love in mushrooms and potatoes. Typically, this is done in oil, but I have a weakness for mushrooms in butter. So I'm going to do this in butter. Just take a bit of butter. Okay, this is melting. We're going to add some pre-chopped mushrooms to this. Again, these are just baby bellas. I actually sat and chopped these, but you get them in the store pre-chopped. Use that. There's no shame in shortcuts as long as your food tastes good. So we're going to add some chopped onion. Now this is just one small medium yellow onion. I don't use red onions for my food, Russian food, because I like that the onion disappears inside the food. Now the smell of frying onions, oh, it's phenomenal. These onions look well done, so I'm going to add the mushrooms to them now. Again, I'm not going to cover this, and I'm not going to add the salt to it. Okay, that's good. Keep it on medium heat. Very high will burn it, especially if you're on an electric. I think half an apple is enough, so I'm just going to slice it up. This is a bit like sangria without the alcohol in it. But if you don't mind a little bit of alcohol, you can go ahead and add something to it. This tea, this fruit tea, can be served hot or cold. It just depends upon what you, the season outside, the weather outside, and what you feel like doing. There. That's good. I'm going to give it a stir. I'm going to cover it, and we're all set. I'm going to turn it off. I'm just going to let it cook in that. Meanwhile, getting back to the cabbage. Now with the cabbage, you want to be sure that it doesn't dry out completely, because fried cabbage does not taste good inside the buns. I'm going to take a quick peek at my apples and be right back. I'm back. The mushrooms smell amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and add salt at this point, and just a little bit of salt. The other thing you need for the mushroom is potatoes. So for the potatoes, you just boil them with some salt. I actually pre-boiled them, but I haven't peeled them yet. So I'm going to go ahead and peel them right now. I normally like using Yukon Gold because the color of the gold potato actually really matches this dish very well. It makes it look prettier. And I personally like the thin skin of the Yukon Gold. It's easy to peel, and I like the taste better, to be honest. Once it's peeled, you can either chop it or mash it. I do a combination. So I chop a little bit, and this is easier to do when it's boiling hot, which is normally when you're trying to avoid touching it. Take your knife and press down. The mushrooms look good. We're just waiting for this water to dry out, but it looks good. And let's check on the soup. It's very nice. And we're going to wait for the cabbage and be right back. And I'm back. So when this water has almost evaporated, you just crack a couple of eggs in it. I don't know why, I have a weakness for brown egg, and the way I crack it is, I just crack it. Typically this is done with hard-boiled chopped eggs. This is just an easy way of doing it, and it tastes pretty much the same. So you're going to let this cook till it totally evaporates and it's dry. Meanwhile, the mushrooms look well done, so I'm going to go ahead and add the potatoes to this. And as usual, I'm not shy of using my hands, which were nicely washed before the show. This is so good. Now, you could actually serve this dish with a bunch of toppings like cheese or you know, whatever you like, but I don't want to put cheese in this. I don't think cheese is very indigenous to Russian food, and the way I serve it is really good, so you'll get to eat it anyway. You want to make sure that your egg is not sticking to the bottom. There. This is done. So I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm going to show you the easy way of making the buns. I'm just going to clear up a little bit and be right back. And I'm back. So these are the buns which have risen. I take a little bit of oil in my hand. And I just spread a little bit out here too. Because these rolls are actually quite sticky. You take one and you just poof it out in your hand. You just stretch it out. Put it in your hand. And you go ahead and take some filling. Be careful not to burn your hand. You can actually even do it on the foil itself. And then you can actually let this cool down also. And you just... Now the thing why I like using dinner rolls also is this flour is so squishy that it's really easy to shut it. Yeah, you shut it together, you take it and you go boop, and you leave it. It's going to come out perfectly round. Let me show you another one. Stretch it out a bit like pizza dough, and this is fun to do. Put it down. Put some stuffing in the middle. Bring all the 4 edges together. Squeeze it into a nice little thing which has everything trapped. Turn it around. Boop, you're done. I'm just going to do the other, then be back. And I'm back. So these are called piroshkis, and you can actually put any stuffing. So if I had kept some mushrooms here, that would have been good too. Now the mushrooms are done, so I'm just going to leave this. This is set, I'm going to turn it off. This is done. And all that's cooking is the borscht. Let's look at that again. This smells really good. I want to keep letting it cook. And I'm going to put these in the oven and be right back. And I'm back. While I was putting the buns in, I realized that the apples are done. So I'm going to pull them out and show you how beautiful and fragrant they look. You know your apples are done when it starts falling apart. Now this is hot, so you need to be careful. Also the sugar around it is caramelized. You can eat this one of 2 ways. You can actually, for both of them, I'm going to sprinkle some confectioner's sugar on it. So cream is a big part of Russian food, which you use it as garnish. And I'm just going to put a dollop of sour cream, whipped cream or sour cream. I have whipped right now. You know what? I'm going to have it just as is. I prefer it without the sour cream. If I had sweetened whipped cream, I might have put some, but this is so good. And if you look here, ooh, that's really good. So I'm going to put this away. And I'm going to dish up the mushrooms. Now these mushrooms cry for a bunch of sour cream. So we are going to put a big dollop of sour cream right on top where it's going to melt. And we're going to take some dill. I'll be right back. We're going to take some dill and chop it up really fine. Remove the stems. Dill is actually a very strong spice, and it's used in a lot of cultures. It's used in pickles most commonly. There's a lot of dill in Russian food. I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit more because we're going to garnish our gazpacho with it, not gazpacho, sorry, borscht with it too. Just take a little bit. I'm going to sprinkle it on top. There. We're going to wait for the buns to come, and we're going to serve out the, I'm going to go check on the buns now. And I'm back. The buns are not done yet. Now for the buns, you need to let them cook till they're almost like dark brown, just slightly less of burnt, because there's a lot of flour inside, and because we have a stuffing, the inside portion doesn't get cooked that easily. I'm going to cut one open to show you exactly what it looks like from inside. Let's go ahead and serve our borscht, which is delicious and ready to be eaten. Oh wow. You should also, I normally do this slightly earlier, right when I'm adding the beets. A little bit of lime juice preserves the color, you know, the bright red color that you like. It also adds a little something to the flavor. You want to make sure you get all the vegetables, all the soup. You're going to add a dollop of sour cream. I think you're seeing a theme here. This also will really thicken up the soup. And sprinkle some dill on it. Dill is one of the most popular garnishes in Russian food. Delicious. And let's spoon out the tea as well. This smells so good. I put some dill in this by mistake. Not a biggie. I'm going to have this hot right now, but you can actually go ahead and have this cold as well. You just put it in the fridge. And some of the vegetables are cooked and some are not. So you're going to get a crunch or not. Oh wow, this smells seriously good. And let me take another look at the buns and I'll be right back. And I'm back. The buns are done. I'm just going to pull them out. You have to be careful, these things are hot. And I'm just going to cut one open so you can see it from inside, what it looks like. There. You can see it's nicely cooked. And let me serve a couple of buns. And our meal is ready. I hope you enjoy it. We have your borscht, your mushrooms with potatoes, your piroshki with the cabbage buns, your tea, and not to be missed, the baked apple with walnut and raisins. Bon appetit.